Hey, welcome to this lesson on intersections and angles. Here are some of the essential questions for this lesson. What is an intersection? What is an angle? And what does it mean to be congruent? What is a bisector? What is a vertex? And how do we measure angles? By the end of the lesson, you should be able to use basic language and labels to define basic geometric figures. So we're basically just going to build off of what we already know to understand some newer concepts of geometry. So we already know what lines are, but what happens when two lines meet? What exactly is happening? Well, when two lines meet, they share a common point. So we know that lines are made up of an infinite number of points. And when two lines meet, that means they share one point in common. And that common point is called the point of intersection. Something else interesting happens when two lines meet. They form angles. An angle is essentially the opening between two lines. Also, an angle is formed when two rays share a common endpoint. So when two rays share an endpoint, we call that a vertex. Remember, that's a vertex. For example, in this angle, the vertex would be right here. We have two different rays. We have this ray and we have this ray. They share this endpoint, this vertex. And so what happens here is it creates an angle. This is what we call an angle, the space between these two rays, that amount of rotation between those two rays. And so when we talk about measuring angles, specifically in degrees, we're saying, when we say, for example, this angle is 30 degrees, we're saying if I took this ray and I rotated about this vertex 30 degrees this way, so 30 degrees this way, then this ray would be on top of this ray. And that's basically what we're saying about angles. That's how we measure the space between those two rays. And so you see that here. Remember, a ray is just part of a line. So if I have the line JN, I can also describe that as the rays KJ and KN together. Together they make up the line JN. So that line also intersects with line LM. So essentially here I have two lines, but I also have four rays when those two lines intersect. I have KM, KN, KL, and KJ. And therefore, since I have four rays, I have four angles resulting in that. When we talk about angles, we most specifically want to look at the vertex. There's three ways we could name this angle. One, we're going to name it going from the point up here C, and we're going to go down to the vertex and then over to the other point B. So we would call that, if we were going that way, sorry, my arrow looks a little shady, but if we were going that way, we would call that angle, and this is just the shorthand for angle, it's a little angle sign, angle CAB. Now, if I was going to go the other way and start here at B and go this way, I could do that as well. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you know, now my B and C are going to switch because I'm starting with B, so I'd have angle BAC. Now the most important part is to make sure we know what our vertex is. It's A. And that A is in the middle. We could not call this angle CBA. That would be incorrect. We can't call it that because that implies that the vertex is B. That would more look like an angle like this, where point C is here, B is here, and A is here. And that may seem trivial right now, but when we get into more complex constructions and we're talking about a bunch of different angles, these two ways right here are the best way to label angles because they're the most specific about exactly how this angle is constructed. Now another way we could name the angle, since vertex A is only the vertex of this one angle, and that's important. A can only be the vertex of one angle, which it is. We can call it angle A. Now if there was another ray coming off of vertex A, and I essentially had another angle here, we could not call this angle that I'm pointing at right now angle A, because A is also the vertex for this angle. So it's not specific enough in that case for us to use angle A. But that's not there, so right now we could call this angle A. So how do we measure angles? Well, we use a protractor, and the protractor has the unit of degrees on it. Kind of already touched on this earlier in the lesson, but what you want to do is you want to line the bottom line, this line right here, up with one of the rays, and it should be going through 0. Notice how if the ray is on this side, you want to use the lower numbers for the angle. And if the ray was going this way, for example, you'd want to use the numbers on top. So the ray should always be going through 0, and you count up from 0 from that ray, and we go up until we see, boom, there's the next ray, and that intersects between 70 and 80, so more specifically 75. Therefore this angle is 75 degrees. And basically what that's saying is, you all know, you all heard of a 180 in snowboarding or skateboarding, or a 360. A 360 is basically when someone just turns around completely in a circle one way. That's because in a circle there's 360 degrees. So if I was to rotate this ray all the way around, it would take 360 degrees. What we're saying when we measure this angle, angle ABC, when we measure this angle, we're saying that if I was to take ray BC right here, and I was to rotate it about the point B, 75 degrees, then ray BC would be on top of ray BA. And this is the first time I'm going to introduce the term congruent. Congruent means having equal measure. So the same measure. If I have two angles that are both 52 degrees, then those two angles are congruent. So as long as this angle is the same amount of degrees as this angle, then those two angles are congruent. A ray or line that divides an angle in half is what we call an angle bisector, which you see right here. Now when I say divides it in half, it means that it takes this big angle and then it divides it into two congruent angles. So these two angles will have the same measure, and that tick mark just means that they're congruent. So for example, if this big blue angle right here, if that big blue angle was 60 degrees, and then this red angle bisected it, then this angle A here would be 30 degrees, and then this angle here, A, would be 30 degrees. Here's the vocabulary we talked about in this lesson. Make sure you write it down in your notebook, copy these, pause the screen if you have to, take your time. Make sure you really understand these, and if you don't, maybe put a question mark next to that word and bring it up in live class, or come to Math Cafe and say, I didn't really understand this. Can you help me? And we'd be more than happy to help you. That's all I have for this lesson. Hope you can answer the essential questions. If you can't, go back through the video, try watching it again, especially the parts where you're having a little trouble. If you still can't understand anything, please reach out to us. Come to Math Cafe and get some help. We'd love to help you out. And that's all. Can't wait to see you in the next lesson, specifying angles.